I'm former Congressman Alan Grayson, and let me get to the point. The point is this: we're spending too much on the military. And by doing so, we're destroying our own economy, and it's been going on that way for quite a while. Let me give you some facts. We spend almost as much on our military as the rest of the world combined. We spent more on our military last year as a percentage of our GNP than we've spent in any year since 1991. Honestly, unless we're being invaded from Mars, there is no possible way to justify that kind of military expenditure, and it is destroying our economy. As I pointed out in my bill, the War is Making You Poor Act. We could take the money that we spent last year and we could give everybody their first $35,000 tax-free, no income tax at all, and we still have enough money left over to reduce the deficit if we simply ended the funding of the wars, $157 billion last year alone. What would that do, $157 billion? Well, do the math. You could create 5 million jobs, paying $30,000 for each job, and reduce unemployment from 8.6%, where it is now, to 5% overnight, and cure the economy if we simply stopped subsidizing war. The answer to all of our problems, the answer to the economy, the answer to unemployment, the answer to a bad housing market, the answer to all the things that trouble us is peace. And that's why I'm proposing peace as part of our platform this year when I'm running for Congress. If you want to learn more, you can find out more at GraysonForCongress.com. But the point is we need peace.
All right, I have to confess that I agree 100% with that point, but what we'll discuss here, I'm going to start with the Unger taker.
I'm glad that the former congressman brings up the Mars invasion because it is an irrational fear of things like that that is the big psychological motivator in Congress and at the Pentagon to keep spending what we're spending, because it is based not in anything tangible. It's based, like the Cold War, like the Vietnam War, it's based in probabilities and fear. And I don't know how to apply a rational argument to that kind of fear.
So that's a great point. So, for example, in Afghanistan, we've been there for over 10 years. It goes on and on. What are we going to do? We're going to save the country? We admit, Al-Qaeda is not there anymore. We've crushed them. There's less than 50 Al-Qaeda there. We already killed bin Laden. We've killed almost everyone except Ayman al-Zawahiri, and he's not in Afghanistan. So it's irrational. But how do we get them out of it? And guys, is it just that it's the fear that they're trying to stoke and use the politics of that? Or is it also because the defense contractors make a ton of money from it?
That's the thing. There's a whole business around this. I mean, we're spending over $600 billion just in 2010 alone. So, I mean, there was a report that came out that one of these guys, one of the contractors, I mean, a lot of money just goes to them. It's not even that it goes to what's going on the ground. I mean, they're spending $10 million on their bar bat mitzvahs for their family. So there is an issue here. I think the war that's happening is here in our own country. We need to be bringing money back here to spend it, to bring it back to education, to healthcare, because this whole country is falling apart itself, and we have to stop trying to save the rest of the world when we're hurting here at home.
Thank you, Ron Paul. Now, Ben.
I am Canadian.
The Canadian version of it. Or Rhonda Paul, we'll call you.
Ben, look, $157 billion. God, what would we rather spend that money on? Just about anything else, right? I mean, to Shira's point about education, anything else. I mean, is there anybody in the country who's like, yeah, I'd love to waste another $157 billion in Afghanistan?
Why is it always Mars?
Yeah, why can't we go to Uranus?
There's like 7 other planets.
Maybe, you know what, nuclear weapons could be on Mars.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about Ben.
Well, obviously Saddam put him there.
There's just a whole ton of other planets that could invade us. Maybe we need to be prepared for that.
You're right.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point.
You should start spending more.
You know what's funny, when they talk about discretionary spending and how, there's always, that's where we can, we're going to cut funding to public broadcasting because that's going to fix this problem. Military spending is 20% of federal spending, right? Defense spending, 20%. The Medicare and Medicaid are like 23%, and Social Security 20%. Discretionary spending total, adding everything up, is only 19%. I mean, everything else that we think is important that we spend money on, we spend more on the defense budget.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's larger than the rest of the discretionary spending combined.
Yeah.
And then, look, here, let me give you more figures, because Alan Grayson mentioned in that our spending is more than anybody else, and it's by a long shot, right? So, for example, in the U.S., we spent $687 billion. China is second at 114 billion. So we're way outspending them. And then you've got 61 billion for France, 57 billion from the UK. Poor Russia's down to 53 billion. We're spending well over 10 times what Russia is spending. Who are we going to take on the world? I mean, but at the same time, you look at it and go, maybe.
Well,
I mean, we're in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya.
Remember when military strategists and politicians used to theorize, or it wasn't even theory, they would suggest that we need to fight 2 wars. We need the ability to fight 2 wars at one time anywhere in the world. And that always seemed like something that was fantasy. Like, when would we ever really be in a situation where we were fighting 2 wars in 2 different places at one time? Well, we have seen in the last 2 years that we're actually capable of doing that. But at the same time, we're so good at it now. We have so many personnel, so much machinery to do that. We actually insulate the population from what that feels like. Like, I don't even feel that this country is in fighting 2 wars at one time. And that cost of the money and the human life, all that expenditure, we're sort of anesthetized from it. And that's a very crafty thing that the Pentagon has been able to do.
So 2 things about that. I read somewhere that only 1% of the country has served in any of these wars, Iraq, Afghanistan, et cetera. Now, back in the days, World War II, everybody goes.
They're the real 1%.
Yeah, unfortunately, they are, but
that
1% fights for the wars that the other 1% creates. I mean, that's the Shira's point, right? The defense contractor with a $10 million bar mitzvah, because he's got so much money, he doesn't know what to do with it. And then there's the F-35. They spent $66 billion on that plane. It doesn't work. The pilots pass out. And for lack of oxygen, right?
I feel like we're behind in everything. I mean, we're behind in the American dream, and yet we continue this as if, like, this will make us number 1. Will it?
I think Brian
number 1 in how much money we're shoveling over to Lockheed Martin. By the way, in those 7 crashes, 2 pilots dead because they can't get a $66 billion plane to work. And that's what it is, and they pay off all the politicians.
What's interesting is the idea that it's acceptable to be fighting 2 wars, that also will think, well, we're only fighting 1 at some point. We'll be like, oh, that's fine. We can always fight 1. So I think that's a great point, that we've sort of built that into the culture. The other issue is that $157 billion that Alan Grayson was discussing when he made the point.
That was clear.
Is that, where is that money going to go? Is that money, these wars are ending. They are winding down. We're done with Iraq, sort of, and we're leading toward being done with Afghanistan. Do we really believe that we will get to the point where we stop those wars, maybe there won't be another one right away, and that we're just going to return that $157 billion to that sort of general fund? That's, of course not.
No way.
They're not giving it up. They will not give it up.
Right. And then, those wars, of course, get funded from a different batch of money than the Defense Department. They're like, no, this is for defense, and this is for offense, I guess.
And that's a hideous thing that George W. Bush and Dick Cheney did. And, of course, the Obama administration has just moved right in because that's an incredibly convenient, convenient, crazy bookkeeping that works for them.
You left off at a really good point, which is, let's say these wars are tapering down and winding down, and we do have more money. And that we do have this interest in, like, saving some money in the military. What would be nice is some progressive leadership that basically said, we're not going to basically just take that money and then pour it into butter, because it's the guns and butter argument that's been around forever. But would actually figure out a way to take that money that's unused and figure out a way to use it that doesn't just feed into the conservative criticism that basically liberals and or progressives are sitting around just waiting to get their hands on all that military money so they can spend more on education, can spend more on health care, can spend more. There are many things to spend money on, but there's no...
We could also balance the budget. How about that?
But how about just balancing the budget for one would be a great...
Here's something else, because it's interesting, in this fight over this nonsensical, inexplicable fight that conservatives have embraced about the Keystone XL pipeline. What if we took that this is an idea, took that $157 billion and toward what Alan Grayson said, we hired people to build crap and fix the highways and expand the rail system and really built it into the infrastructure. Republicans will have the same initial reaction that we're having at this point, that they're like, oh, look at liberals, they can't wait to spend it. Yet that's their claim on the argument for the Keystone XL pipeline, is that no, it'll create jobs. But since we know that's not what they really want, because they never let us spend that money on infrastructure, that Keystone Pipeline, oddly enough, is because they want to give it to the oil companies.
Yeah, and whenever, and this will be my last point on this, look, whenever you go to spend money on Americans, the middle class, et cetera, they go, well, how are you going to pay for it, right? Mm-hmm. But when you go to spend money on war or taxes for the rich, they never pay for it. They never bother with, hey, we should balance the budget, et cetera. But I want to leave on a note from a Republican president who I think was 100% right. That's the last Republican president to balance the budget, Dwight Eisenhower. He said, watch out for the military-industrial complex, because once, and everybody just leaves it at that, but you have to remember why he said that. He said, once we've created these companies whose job is to make money from war, they will want more war. Yeah. No one has ever been more right about that, and that's exactly why we're in 2.5 wars and increasing every day.
They'll always find another reason.